What is outside my walls is of no concern to me. Those walls are strong and thick, but not so high as to keep out a dragon. Dragons fly. I built in stone. Stone does not burn. When the sun sets, your line shall end. Harren, Hoare and Aegon Targaryen, the world of ice and fire. The Conquest. While all of the kings of Westeros faced some kind of attack from rivals at the very start of Aegon's conquest, foes who saw opportunity in the instability the conquest had brought, King Harren Hoare, Harren the Black, the king of the Isles and Rivers, by far faced the biggest challenge to his rule. While House Hoare had ruled over the Riverlands since the days of Harren's grandfather, the Lords of the Trident, in truth, despised their ironborn king. Thousands of Riverlanders had died building his great castle on the shores of the God's Eye, Harrenhal, and the kingdom itself had been stripped of materials, with many lords and small folk beggared by his need for gold to fund his project. In Aegon Targaryen, the Lords of the Trident saw a solution to their woes, and the Rivermen rose up against Black Harren. The rebel Riverlords were led by Lord Edmyn Tully of Riverrun, with countless others flocking to his banner when he declared for House Targaryen and raised the three-headed dragon banner above his seat of Riverrun. He rode out to join with Aegon with all of his strength, which gave his peers heart. One by one, lords declared for Aegon over Harren. The Blackwoods, the Malisters, the Vances, the Brackens, the Pipers, the Strongs, all summoned their levies and descended on Harrenhal. King Harren was always said to be an overconfident man, and when he found himself suddenly outnumbered, he took refuge in his new, supposedly impregnable stronghold. It would take even the largest army ever assembled months, maybe years, to take the castle. Harrenhal was by far the largest ever raised in Westeros, boasting 5 gargantuan towers and an infinite source of fresh water from the God's Eye itself. Huge subterranean vaults, well stocked with provisions that could in theory last years, and massive walls of black stone, higher than any ladder and too thick to be broken by any ram or shattered by a trebuchet. Harren barred his gates and bunkered down with his remaining sons and supporters to withstand a siege, for however long that may be. Harren had beggared the Riverlands and the Iron Islands alike to ornate his dream. The Thoughts of Catelyn Stark, A Clash of Kings, Chapter 7, Catelyn 1. Aegon Targaryen was of a different mind altogether, and had no plans of a long, drawn-out siege slowing down his conquest. Once he had joined his army with that of Edmyn Tully and the other Riverlords to ring the castle, he sent a maester to the gate under a peace banner to parley. Harren emerged to meet him, an old man and grey, yet still with a youthful ferocity in his gleaming black armour. Each king had his banner-bearer and his maester to attend, so the words they exchanged are still remembered today. One of the very few instances where the very words of Aegon Targaryen himself can be quoted directly, giving us a better insight into the man himself. "Yield now," Aegon began, "and you may remain as Lord of the Iron Islands. Yield now, and your sons shall live to rule after you. I have 8,000 men outside your walls." "What is outside my walls is of no concern to me," said Harren. "Those walls are strong and thick, but not so high to keep out dragons." "Dragons fly," said Aegon. "I built in stone," replied Harren. "Stone does not burn." To which Aegon said, "When the sun sets, your line shall end." Even the smallest chance of a peaceful outcome had now been lost, and all that remained for Harren, in the words of House Targaryen, were fire and blood. What Aegon would do next truly gave meaning to those words that would echo for generations. It is said that Harren spat at that and returned to his monstrous castle. Once inside, he sent every man of his to the parapets, armed with spears and bows and crossbows, promising land and riches to whichever one of them could bring the dragon down. "Had I a daughter, the dragon slayer could claim her hand as well," Harren proclaimed. "Instead, I shall give him one of Tully's daughters, or all 3 if he likes. Or maybe he could pick one of Blackwoods' whelps, or Strong's, or any girl born to these traitors of the Trident, these lords of yellow mud." Then Harren retired to his tower, surrounded by his household guard, to have supper with his remaining sons, not knowing that his fate had already been sealed. No amount of stone, no amount of soldiers, no amount of confidence would stop the coming Black Dread. It has an ill repute, and one that's well deserved. It's said that Harren and his sons still walk the halls by night, afire. Those who look upon them also burst into flames. I fear no shade, sir. It is written in the seven-pointed star that spirits, wights and revenants cannot harm a pious man, so long as he is armoured in faith. Then armour yourself in faith by all means, but wear a suit of mail and plate as well. Every man who holds this castle seems to come to a bad end. The Mountain, the Goat, even my father, Jaime Lannister and Bonifer Hasty. A Feast for Crows, Chapter 27, Jaime 3. As the last light of the sun faded, Harren's men stared into the gathering darkness, clutching at their spears and crossbows. When no dragon initially appeared, some may have believed that Aegon's threats had been hollow. They had obviously not heard about his victories thus far, but Aegon Targaryen did indeed take his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread, up high, through the clouds, up until the dragon was no bigger than a small black dot upon the moon. Then he descended rapidly, well inside the castle walls. On wings as black as pitch, Balerion plunged through the night, and when the great towers of Harrenhal appeared beneath him, the dragon roared his fury and bathed them in black fire, shot through with swirls of red and scarlet. The flames of any dragon are unimaginably hot. The Black Dread's was something different altogether. The true fury of old Valyria, alive once again. Stone does not burn. Harren had so boldly boasted in his meeting with Aegon. But again, this showed Harren's hubris, as of course, a castle was not made entirely of stone alone. Wood and wool and hemp and straw, bread and salted beef and grain, it all took fire. Nor were Harren's iron men made of stone. Smoking, screaming, shrouded in flame, they ran across the yard and tumbled from the walkways, to die upon the ground below, a quicker death than that of dragonflame. And even stone will crack and melt if fire is hot enough. The accounts of the Riverlords and Maesters sat outside Harrenhal in Aegon's camp later stated that the towers of Harrenhal glowed red against the night, like 5 great candles, and like candles they began to twist and melt as runnels of molten stone ran down their sides. This great fortress, now a twisted shadow of what it had been moments before. Harrenhal had witnessed more horror in its 300 years than Castle Rock had witnessed in 3,000. The Thoughts of Jaime Lannister, A Feast for Crows, Chapter 27, Jaime 3. Harren the Black, the king of the Isles and Rivers, whose tyranny had haunted the Riverlands, died, and his last sons died with him in the fires that engulfed his monstrous fortress that night, as they were supposedly sat around a high table feasting. With Harren, the legendary House Hoare died with him, which would leave a huge power vacuum in the Iron Islands. So too did the Iron Islanders' hold on the Riverlands evaporate overnight as well, with the Rivermen free of ironborn rule for the first time in 3 generations. The next morning, as the sun rose outside the smoking and smouldering ruins of the castle, Aegon Targaryen accepted oaths of fealty from Edmyn Tully, Lord of Riverrun, and named him his first Lord Paramount, the Lord Paramount of the Trident. While not as powerful as a king, these Lord Paramounts would hold authority over their respective kingdoms on behalf of the king himself. The other Riverlords did homage as well, to Aegon as king, and to Tully as their liege lord. And for the first time in a very long time, the Riverlands was now once again a unified kingdom, rather than hundreds of small and petty kingdoms that had made up most of their history. When the ashes had cooled enough to allow men to enter the castle safely, the swords of the fallen, many broken or melted into twisted ribbons of steel by dragonfire, were gathered up and sent back to the Aegon fort in wagons, as Aegon the Conqueror had another statement to the Lords of Westeros he wished to make to cement the place of House Targaryen. One of the things I think is often really overlooked when it comes to the downfall of Harren the Black is the way the story plays out as told. It's really his own arrogance and hubris that are his end. Surely, by the time Aegon reached Harrenhal, news of the impact his dragons had on the small-scale battles during the weeks of Aegon's initial landing would have reached Harren. Aegon, after all, was very open about his intent to take the whole of Westeros. Yet, for whatever reason, Harren still believed the dragons were no threat to his position, and would have been more than happy to sit behind his walls, while reinforcements hopefully came from the Iron Islands, which was no guarantee in itself. But even without dragons, it's really Harren's own doing that would cause his downfall. He was a tyrant, and his rule, especially over the Riverlands, was brutal. He'd won himself a few supporters within the nobility of the Trident. I strongly suspect the lords were just waiting and hoping for some kind of reason to rise up against him. If not Aegon, anyone strong enough to challenge Harren. Perhaps if the Storm Kings of House Targaryen were in a stronger position, some sort of alliance could have been forged between the Rivermen and the Stormlanders. But the reality is, Harren's grip on his kingdom was tight, and him realistically conquering at the very least the Crownlands and the Stormlands was a strong possibility, should Aegon Targaryen never had set foot in Westeros. Speaking of that, given how quickly Edmyn Tully declared for Aegon, has me speculating that maybe there was some kind of deal or agreement in place before the conquest started between the two. Perhaps Aegon had been in communication with Tully. I've always believed the theory that Aegon and his sisters spent a lot more time in Westeros before the conquest than we know of in lore, other than their known trip to Oldtown and Lannisport. It's not hard to believe he could have added Riverrun to this list, or perhaps Edmyn Tully could have travelled to Oldtown or Lannisport to meet Aegon.